Hi, so this is Team Alt E here. First of all, we would like to thank you for this challenge. We really enjoyed working on it. So, to begin with, we'll start with an executive summary. Next slide, please. So, we'll be talking a little bit about the background and the breakdown of emissions caused by Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, and some of the ways by which it can be reduced or condensed. Next slide, please. To talk a little bit about the background, Lost Hills oil field is the 18th largest oil field by size and sixth largest oil field in production in the state of California, making it one of the largest in the country with over 110 million barrels producible reserves still in the ground. The production a couple of years back was estimated to be around 9.7 million barrels of oil and 5.2 billion cubic feet of gas. So, and after doing a little bit of literature survey, it is estimated to be, have around 451 class 2 enhanced oil recovery wells and six water disposal wells as of 2016. So, the emission splits will be discussed in the upcoming slides.
With regards to the first part of the challenge, which is to find an estimate percentage in the reduction of emissions, our approach was based on Chevron's sustainability report, which had a reference stating that Chevron uses American Petroleum Institute's compendium of GHG emissions to find out the yearly emissions. So in that document, we found an example of an oil field in Texas, which has 320 oil wells. And as discussed by my partner before, we found that there are 450 wells in Lost Hills oil fields. So we made an estimate number of assumptions for the number of boilers, compressors, engines, fleet vehicles, storage tanks that would be there in Lost Hills oil fields, and we estimated that they release approximately 317,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions per year. Now, this for this calculation, we only calculated Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. Scope 1 is produced when for fuels are combusted or the process involved in production of crude oil and natural gas and the fleet vehicles that are present on site to help move fuels. And Scope 2 emissions is the emissions that is directly purchased from the utilities. So if you see a breakdown of the total emissions, we found that Scope 1 comes up to 290,000 tons of CO2 equivalent a year, which is more than 90% of the total emissions. And Scope 2 is due to the electricity generation from the utility, which comes up to 27,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. Now, with regards to the major contributors to the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, we found that the venting process in oil production comes up to around 230,000 metric tons of CO2e. So this high number is mainly due to flaring. Flaring is a process in which the excess oil is burnt out and released into the atmosphere. And since fossil oil fields produce a large amount of crude oil yearly, the storage tank size is pretty huge, which when fuel is stored releases unwanted gas back into the environment. And there are ways to reduce Scope 1, which will be discussed later by my other partner. And Scope 2 emissions is directly due to the electricity purchased from Pacific Gas and Electric Company down in California, which comes up to around 226,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now we compared what methane and carbon dioxide contribute to the total emissions. And methane is roughly around 63% of the total emissions, whereas carbon dioxide is only 37%. And a major factor for this is that methane is almost 21 times dangerous as carbon dioxide. One ton of methane emissions is equal to 21 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So, although methane in the actual number of tons is less when converted to the carbon dioxide equivalent, it's almost 200,000 metric tons.
Time. Please start wrapping up your last thoughts.
Yeah. So, as Chevron estimated that there's around 22,500 metric tons saved due to solar, and we estimated that there's 317,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. The estimated reduction is around 7%, which is not great. And this is entirely due to the fact that 80% of the energy on the Lost Hill oil fields is provided by solar. Yeah, so now next my friend will
Yeah.
speak on the
Hi,
technology.
I will quickly explain about the technologies that we can use to reduce the GHG emissions. So one of the technologies we could consider is the fuel cell capture technology. It is currently being used by ExxonMobil. So what they do is that they capture the flue gas from their coal plant, and they concentrate and capture the carbon dioxide as a side reaction, which is created during the power generation. So when they do capture this 90% of CO2, the power output has been increased by 80%, and the pollutant contents can be decreased by almost 78%. And the cost of electricity for this technology is around just 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And it can achieve the cost well below the Department of Energy's target, which is around like $40 per ton. The next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So another technology is the flare.iq, which is primarily used for reducing the flaring content over there. So in flare.iq, we use a digital platform to monitor the amount of flue gas or flare gas that is being sent through the valves. So what we use is that the software and hardware system is being integrated such that the valves are being controlled. They work through the distributed control systems using the TCP or IP Modbus to control the flares valve. The next slide. So this is one of the outputs that they have proposed, and yeah, as you can see, the BTU per standard cubic feet and time in minutes is plotted against, and from that we can easily monitor the amount of flaring that is being done over there, and the walls can be controlled. So other technologies that are being discussed are selective catalytic reduction, where the oxides of nitrogen are being compressed along with water and they are being discharged. And some other technologies are like dry seals in centrifugal compressors and packing seals, which are commonly used for reducing methane content of the system, of the emission. So even air quality monitors can be used for detecting if there is any methane around.
Now, to sum up, we observe that solar helps in reducing emissions, but by a very small percentage. And emissions due to scope 1 processes such as flaring, gas thermals need to be reduced highly. So a lot of innovative technologies on the rise. A lot of startups are partnering with major players in the oil market, such as ExxonMobil, BP, and they are working towards reducing reduced emissions and working towards a net zero goal in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We will now commence the 5-minute Q&A with the judges.
Thank you for your presentation. What did you think about the combustion CO2 that you saw in the Lost Hills, and what are the technologies that you thought could address that part of the emissions, or did you only focus on methane?
So combustion, we found that a lot of turbines and boilers that are being used in the lost fields, oil fields, are resulting to up to 60,000 tons of CO2e per year. And this, in fact, was not much of methane. It's majorly due to carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm.
So we would suggest using more energy efficient technologies that are available in the market to reduce it a bit further.
Okay. Do you have okay, so you believe that one is more of a there's not technology development that's required for that. There's commercial technology and it's just a deployment issue?
So we couldn't get facts on what Chevron is exactly using in the Lost Hills oil field.
Okay.
So we couldn't make an estimate of what technologies that could be employed down there.
Yeah, so for carbon dioxide, we suggested that fuel cell technology, which is currently being used by ExxonMobil, can be used for capturing carbon dioxide.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have very good analysis and comprehensive list of solutions, including the molten carbonate fuel cell, I believe is the one that you referred to. So when you look at this technologies list that you have, how would you rank them per their impact and let's say time to deployment?
Yeah, so I would say that we can combine the fuel cell technology along with Flare IQ, since they are like two different technologies which can be integrated together, and one of them could reduce the carbon dioxide content and the other could monitor the methane content.
As far as the volumes goes, the reduction for each one of them as a magnitude, I know these are rough, very rough numbers for the Lost Hills. What do you think it would be?
Yeah, like in the fuel cell technology, as suggested by ExxonMobil, it can capture up to 90% of the carbon dioxide being emitted. So yeah, it could comparatively capture a large amount if it might be implemented in Lost Hills.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you take me through, you made an assumption early on from using a Texas oil field. What was your thought on using that to model the Lost Hills versus a California field? What made you think, how did you build your confidence on using that assumption?
So in terms of production, we found that the Texas field was pretty close to what the California field was producing. In terms of gas, the Texas field was producing twice the amount of gas. And in terms of crude oil produced, it was producing almost equal amounts that the Lost Hills oil field is producing. Only reason that we used that field was that they had 320 wells, and there's almost roughly around 450 oil wells down in Lost Hills. So we had a rough scale of conversion that we could use to convert it to what the emissions in Lost Hills might be.
So it was based on similar size?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's good then. We're almost out of time with that, right?
Awesome. Yeah, there's about 10 seconds left. So presenters, thank you very much for your time. You may leave the meeting now and best of luck.